evening. Let's start with our motivation. So we have a very precious human life with all the conditions necessary to practice the Dharma. It was quite difficult to create all the causes in previous lives to have this opportunity. And so often we don't really understand our opportunity or appreciate it, and instead squander it thinking about objects of attachment and anger and jealousy and so on. So one antidote to that squandering our time in the 8 worldly concerns is to reflect on our mortality and that one day we will die. And we don't know when that's going to happen. So it's good to really use our opportunity while we have it. Because at the time of death, there's no rerun facility and no, opportunity to go back in time and do things differently. So the bodhicitta is the thought to attain awakening for the benefit of all beings. And that's the thing that, more than anything else, we should be imprinting in our mind stream while we have the opportunity. So even though our love and compassion may be a bit wobbly and not so stable, to try and cultivate them and generate them again and again, leading eventually to having that altruistic intention, aspiring for full awakening, and generating that again and again. So really, you could call it reformatting the hard disk of our mind. So while we have that opportunity, let's do that. And generate that bodhicitta with a sense of confidence that we can actually, in fact, actualize it one day. So let's make that our motivation for sharing the Dharma this evening. Okay, so we've been going through Gomchen Lamrim for about a year, over a year, yeah? So we're on the middle scope right now, talking about the 4 truths for the Aryas. And we've covered talking about true dukkha, the unsatisfactory experience that is cyclic existence, and we've been also talking about the true origins of dukkha, the mental afflictions that arise and keep us trapped in samsara. And so we covered that last week, or finished covering it, I should say. And so this week we're going into the topic of how we die and are reborn in cyclic existence. Okay, so it's not the 12 links right now. The 12 links actually aren't included in the Gomchen Lamrim, but it's some other factors that talk about this. So what I'll do is I'll read some from Gomchen Lamrim, and then I thought I'd read from Lamrim Chenmo, because the explanation's a little bit clearer, and then come back to this one, because sometimes there's slightly different perspectives in the two texts. Okay, so first we talk about the factors of death, which mean, what makes us die, put it that way, okay? So you can go down the screen a little bit, whoever has that. Yeah, to the outline, that's the factors of death. Okay, so the first one is the exhaustion of the lifespan. So what happens when we take a rebirth? There's a certain amount of karma. There's a certain karmic lifespan that comes along with that rebirth. So due to factors that we accumulated in previous lives, then there's the karma to live a certain amount of time. Just the natural amount of a natural amount of karma. So when that karma is finished, then that's one of the reasons that we die, because we just finished the karma for that particular lifespan. So that's why sometimes you see, like in the womb, children, there's miscarriages, and that's, they would say from a Buddhist perspective, because the being just had a little bit of karma left on a human life, so they experience it for as long as they're in the womb, and then there's the miscarriage. Yeah, so something like that. And some people live very old, some people die younger, more just from natural causes, more or less, although nowadays on death certificate they never say you die of old age, or you die of natural causes. They always have some disease or something that, accident or injury that they say. Yeah. As if you didn't have that thing happen, you still would be alive forever and ever and ever. Okay, so, a lot of us live our full karmic lifespan, and we die, and that's it. Another reason why death occurs is the exhaustion of merit. So we might have the karmic lifespan to live until here, but we run out of merit midway, the merit to, let's say, receive, to have food or shelter or medicine. So we might have the karmic lifespan to live long, but the merit to keep our life alive has been exhausted. So we can no longer receive the food that we need to sustain the life, or maybe shelter or medicine or something like that. Okay, because the merit to sustain the life has run out. Then the third one, here he says the death from failure to avoid danger. Okay, so in the sutras they list 9 different causes. Okay, so it's interesting what these 9 are, and so overeating. So I don't know if that means that you overeat and you die immediately, or if it's you're constantly overeating, and so, maybe high cholesterol, maybe, just your body can't move very much, too many aches and pains from overeating. So maybe something like that. The second one is eating something indigestible. So, you ate something that your system can't tolerate, and you die. Third one is eating without having digested the previous meal. So I think we do that one a lot. Yeah, so I don't think it means that, you're going to die right away. Otherwise, I would have been dead long ago. But maybe it's talking just about, developing bad eating habits, stuffing yourself all the time. Okay, and then 4 is failure to expel undigested food that is accumulated in the stomach. So I don't know, Venerable Jigme, do you have any commentary on what that might mean?
Many things can cause that. The bowel can get twisted, and so things can go through.
Okay. Intestinal obstructions is the next one. Failure to dispel undigested food that is accumulated in the stomach. This is from the viewpoint, of Ayurvedic and Tibetan medicine, so. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, the next one is intestinal obstruction, so that could be a twisted bowel, or it could be something, lymphoma is one, isn't it, that can obstruct down there? Or who knows, because this is general. I mean, they didn't have the sophisticated medical diagnoses back then that we have now. Then not relying on specific medicines for specific illnesses. So maybe you don't like taking medicine, or the doctor prescribes one thing and you don't want to take it, you take something else. Or, maybe not having a good doctor, being a rebellious patient, something along that line. Nobody here is like that, I know. Then the next one is failure to understand the distinction between accustomed and unaccustomed activities. So maybe, I'm just guessing here, maybe what that means is you have kind of habitual things you do, and then all of a sudden you start doing all sorts of things that you don't have the stamina for doing. You haven't built up to being able to do something, but you start to do it anyway. You start to do triathlons when, before all you've done is take walks around the block. So maybe something like that, okay? Then the next one is untimely death by accident. And so this is one where there was a negative karma created in a previous time, and it ripened suddenly as the end of your life, okay? So it could be like having a car accident, or, a sudden heart attack or a stroke, something like that. So you have the lifespan, the karmic lifespan. You have the merit to receive, the wherewithal that you need to stay alive, but some other karma ripens, and your body can't sustain life. You die from injury or illness very suddenly in an untimely way. In other words, you're a young person. So this explains why, some people die in accidents, some people, get very ill while they're children or whatever, some kind of karma like that from a previous life. And then the last one is engaging in sexual intercourse. So maybe here they mean, too much sexual intercourse, so that your body vitality just gets diminished or something like that. Okay? So those are, the different causes of death, what brings death on. So it's interesting to think about, because we all know many people who have died, and to think about, what kind of karmically has gone on. So in a terrorist attack, for example, people dying together in a terrorist attack, that would be the ripening of some kind of collective karma, because they died together as a group. But also it would be this one of an untimely death with some kind of negative karma suddenly ripening there on that day, even though they had a karmic lifespan that could be long, or they have merit to have food and so on. Okay, so this kind of shows us that things are very uncertain in samsara. Yeah, we have lots of expectations. I'm going to live a long life, and then I'll plan my death out. I want you here, and I want to die like this, and da-da-da-da-da. Have our death all planned out because we're control freaks. But that's not what happens. Karma ripens, and that's it. Okay? So it should bring in our mind some awareness of the instability of life in cyclic existence. And it shows, how we're so unaware of the uncertainty of cyclic existence, because when somebody dies suddenly, we're all so surprised. When a friend dies in a car accident, or a relative dies in a car accident, or a young person has a stroke or whatever, we're all so surprised, like, that's not supposed to happen. That wasn't, in my plan book and my calendar for today. But this is life in cyclic existence, very unstable, like that. Okay, so then the next section is the mind at death, how you're thinking at the time of death. Okay, so Lamrim Chenmo divides it into 3 sections here of dying with a virtuous mind, a non-virtuous mind, and a neutral mind. So this is the mind that you have during the death process. But it's the mind when you're still somewhat conscious. Okay, so although he's talking from a sutra perspective here, if we were to map this onto the tantric perspective, where we have the 8 stages, or the 8 visions, whatever you want to call them, this would be in the first 4. Once you get to the white one, then your mind is much subtler, and there's no conceptual, gross conceptual activity at that time. Okay, so Jay Rinpoche says, those who die with virtuous minds, whether through remembering on their own or through being reminded by others, okay, so this is talking about, we have a habit of virtue, so we remember a virtuous thought on our own, or maybe we're fortunate enough to have some Dharma friends nearby who talk to us about the Dharma, or chant, or remind us of our teacher, remind us of our deities, somebody who reminds us of a virtuous thought. So that kind of friend can be really opportune at the time of death. What we don't want is a friend who's going to remind us of everybody we're angry at, and everybody we're attached to who we don't want to be separated from, and all the people who owe us money, and all the people who didn't appreciate us. And, we don't want a friend who's going to remind us of all that. Okay, so those who die with virtuous minds, whether through remembering on their own or through being reminded by others, turn their minds to virtues such as faith. Okay, so faith, trust, confidence, remembering the qualities of the 3 jewels, entrusting our spiritual guidance to them. For as long as coarse discrimination, in other words, ordinary types of consciousness, remain. Okay, so that's those who die with virtuous minds. In the case of death for those who have cultivated either virtue or non-virtue unequally, okay, so some people have created more virtue, some people more non-virtue, they either remember on their own or they're reminded by others of what they have become accustomed to do repeatedly in the past. So we are creatures of habit, and the kinds of thoughts we had in the past come naturally at the time of death, or maybe somebody reminds us of them, just even unintentionally, they do something and they remind us of a certain kind of thought that we had. So this is really important to pay attention to. Okay, because he says what they've been accustomed to do repeatedly in the past, and this becomes extremely powerful. So we're creatures of habit, yeah. Maybe every day in our mind we whine about something. It may not come out of our mouth, but every day we're like, something in our mind is complaining, and we put that imprint strongly. Complain, I don't like this, I don't like that, why are these people doing this, why are they doing that? Yeah, so it could be some habitual thought, it could be some heavy thought, very strong one. So it could be either virtue or non-virtue. But when that arises during the death process, it becomes very extreme, very powerful. And he says their minds then become absorbed in this and forget all else. So especially if it's like a thought that, a negative thought that you habitually ruminate on, you know, this is really showing the danger of our ruminating mind, you know, when we sit there and they did this, they did that. You know, you put that energy in your mind, you set up that habit, then if that's what comes up at death, maybe you see something you didn't like, you start ruminating on it and you're getting angry, and then the mind just stays fixated on it. Scary, isn't it? Okay, if they are equally familiar, so that could happen in terms of virtue too, but it can also happen in terms of non-virtue. So this means that it's really important to be aware of what's going on in our mind all the time. And when we start to ruminate on something, you know, with a negative mental state, to cut it right away. Yeah, and even just by, you know, thinking, you know, I don't want this kind of thought arising at the time of death, so why am I nourishing it now? And if it's something that you can't just cut like that because your mind is really involved in it, you're clinging onto something, some grudge because of what somebody did to you before, or some longing you had that was never satisfied that always comes up. You know, if you see you have something like that, then it's really important to work on that now while our mind is clear and cut that attachment or that grudge so that it doesn't become very powerful and consume our mind at the time of death. If virtue and non-virtue are equally familiar, okay, then the person cannot stop remembering what they remember first. So virtue and non-virtue may be equal, but maybe you remember a virtuous thought first, or maybe you remember a non-virtuous thought first. That's the one that you stay fixated on. Okay? Those who, so, I mean, this is really telling us about making preparation now. And we can actually see, even in one day, you know, you may have some kind of negative thought in the morning about something that happened, and then you ruminate on it all day long over some teeny thing. The mind's going on and on and on about it. And, you know, it gets fixated, doesn't it? Yeah? I have to wash the dishes for somebody else because, you know, they're not feeling good today. Oh, I always have to wash the dishes. I have to wash them more than other people. This world is totally unfair. I always get the creepy jobs, you know. Now everybody else, they pretend to not feel well, and I get stuck with doing more dishes. And all day long, this is going through your mind. True or not true? Yeah? Okay, so it really highlights to us that allowing this kind of stuff to continue is really detrimental to us. Those who have cultivated virtue seem to pass from darkness into light. They, as they die, various pleasant and attractive images appear as though in a dream. So the thing is, during the death process, we have lots of different appearances. So if virtue is prominent in our mind, we have pleasant appearances. If non-virtue is prominent, we have unpleasant experiences. It's kind of like dreams, you know? If we have a lot of nightmares, it's some ripening of negative karma. If we usually have pleasant dreams or neutral dreams, it's ripening of corresponding kind of karma. So that person who's familiar with virtue dies comfortably, and at the point of death, intense feelings of suffering do not arise in their body. For those who are currently doing what is right, in other words, what's virtuous, the final agony of death is minimal. Okay? So creating a lot of virtue during our life diminishes the agony at death, and it also, habituates our mind with virtue. We have a virtuous thought at the time of death, which makes a virtuous karma ripen, which makes us have a good rebirth. Okay, so benefit of observing our mind and monitoring our thoughts. Okay, then dying with a non-virtuous mind. Those who die with non-virtuous minds, whether through remembering on their own or through being reminded by others, remember non-virtue, such as attachment, for as long as coarse discrimination remains. So you kind of expect him to say anger, you know? Kind of somebody who dies with anger, yeah, that must be really rotten. But he says attachment. But attachment, you feel good, you know? You really like someone, you like something, you get what you want. Why is that negative? Does your mind ever say that? Yeah, what's wrong with there's the big, what's wrong with being happy? Well, nothing's wrong with being happy. The problem is attachment to the object that we think makes us happy, because that attachment just holds on to it and makes us do all sorts of negative things to get what we want. Okay, so some non-virtue. You have a habitual mind of attachment, always wanting this and that and the other thing. So there you are dying, and oh, I wish so and so were here with me. Or, oh, so-and-so's here with me, but I have to separate from them. I don't want to separate from them. I want to always be with them. Or like the woman's father I told you about in the Tibetan community. Oh, I have this bag of gold I buried when I fled Tibet. Where is it? I need to tell my daughter where it is. Yeah, so attachment like that comes in your mind. Or worse yet is anger. Why are they playing this TV program in the hospital? Yeah, ugh. Please don't take me to a hospital when it's clear I'm dying. I don't want to be in a room with a roommate that's, watching. Yeah, or the election. Oh God, could you imagine dying to Donald Trump? Oh goodness, and you really get the DTs from DT. Okay. Okay. Yeah, so you want to make sure you have kind of a peaceful atmosphere. Okay. At the point of death, so this person who has cultivated a lot of non-virtue, they experience intense physical pain. When those who are currently cultivating non-virtue die, they experience signs foretelling the effects of the non-virtue they have engaged in. As if in a nightmare, many unpleasant images appear to them, and they seem to pass from light to darkness. Okay? When those who have committed serious non-virtuous actions observe these unpleasant signs, they experience physical pain and their hair stands on end. They shake their heads and feet, void urine and excrement, reach up towards the sky, roll their eyes back, drool, and more. Yeah? You've seen people die like that? Yeah. Yeah. So, some people just really very difficult deaths. You know, extreme pain, extreme clinging, a lot of fear, a lot of negative visions, frightful visions appearing to them. Okay, if they have been moderate in their non-virtue, then not all of these things will happen. Some will and some will not. Wrongdoers suffer terrible agony at the moment of death. Such agony is found everywhere that beings are born, except among the God realms and the hell beings. So they must die very quickly, not slow deaths where there can be a lot of agony. And then here it says at the time of the death, but I think it means while dying, you know. So while dying, whereupon discrimination will become unclear, beings are attached to the self with which they have long been familiar. Okay, so discrimination becomes unclear. We can't think so clearly, you know? When we're dying, we can't think so clearly. We can't identify things. It becomes difficult to really discern what is what. And so, then beings are attached to the self with which they have long been familiar. Okay, so we get very attached to who we think we are. And we don't want to, lose ourselves, so to speak. Now, because at death, we're really losing our whole identity. You know, we've spent a whole lifetime building up an identity. I am so-and-so, you know, from this race, this nationality, this occupation. I like this, I don't like that. These are my family members, these are my friends, these are my values, these are my political views. We have this, you know, we create this whole self and then become very attached to it. Now, if you, just in case you think you don't have much attachment to the self, in case you think, I'm not very attached to myself, then just notice how you react when somebody doesn't agree with one of your opinions. Okay? When somebody doesn't agree with your opinion, even on crucially important topics, like how much chlorine to put in the rinse water. That's really important, you know. I mean, a matter of drops can really be life and death. And, and so you're very attached to your opinion on that. Or you're very attached to your opinion on, how often we should vacuum. Because that also really, for the good of the country, we have to vacuum, every so often, because if we don't vacuum on certain days and a certain number of times every week, the world might fall apart. We don't want that. Okay? So, attached to the self, attached to our opinions. You know, what happens when somebody doesn't agree with our opinion about how often we should vacuum? Do we just say, oh, that's fine, I'll do it your way? No. Because somebody disagreeing with our opinion is insulting us. They're not just disagreeing with an opinion, they are discounting my intelligence. Aren't they? Yeah. So I have to stick up for myself. I'm not going to take any bullying by anybody. Okay, so just in case you think you don't have any attachment to the self, just be aware if maybe these kind of things happen to you. I know they happen to the people you don't like. The people who defend their opinions, who think less chlorine is okay, when you think more chlorine is necessary. And then there's the people who say, why are you putting chlorine in the water anyway? Yeah. Why don't you buy a dishwasher? Then we have a whole new thing. You know, somebody wants a dishwasher and somebody else wants a dishwasher because, you know, what do you call them? Commercial dishwashers cost $30,000. Yeah? So who wants to spend $30,000 to wash dishes? I do. What, you want to waste $30,000 on that? No, we need to use this number of drops of chlorine. Okay, but we're not attached to ourself at all, are we? Yes, exactly, because the dishwasher is going to get dirty too. Then we have to wash the dishwasher with chlorinated water.
No doubt about that.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Yeah. Okay. So after that, through the influence of attachment to the self, yeah, because attachment to the self has arisen because the mind is not thinking so clearly. You can't discern things. You're getting attached to who you think you are. And because the the elements of the body are losing strength and they can't support the gross consciousness anymore, then there's this feeling like I'm ceasing to exist. I'm becoming non-existent. You can't think so clearly. Your thoughts, you don't have much mental energy because your bodily elements are weakening. And it feels like you're ceasing to exist. And for people who have self-grasping, that is the scariest thing of all. The most fearful thing, that I might cease to exist. So what happens at that time? You know, we grasp. And we crave future embodiment. You know, I want a body. You know, I don't want to separate from this one. And if I have to separate, I want another one. And we hold on strongly. Okay, this causes the intermediate state. So this kind of grasping itself happens, you know, as we're dying. That brings on the intermediate state. Attachment to the self also occurs among stream enterers and once returners. So these are people who've realized emptiness directly. So they also have attachment to the self. But as they investigate it with wisdom, they reject it rather than assent to it. Okay, so they can, because they have wisdom, because they're familiar with the understanding of emptiness, they're able to recognize this attachment to the self, apply the meditation on emptiness to it, and release it. The way a powerful person dominates a weak person. So their powerful wisdom dominates their weak ignorance. Attachment to the self does not occur among non-returners. Okay. So in terms of bodhisattvas, definitely attachment to self is going to happen for bodhisattvas on path of accumulation, path of preparation. And by the path of seeing, most bodhisattvas can control their rebirth. So, yeah. Then dying with an ethically neutral mind. Those who are currently cultivating neither virtue nor non-virtue, or who have done neither. Who is that? Yeah, maybe an infant still in the womb who hasn't cultivated virtue or non-virtue. Huh? Yeah, it might be them. Yep. Okay, they do not remember virtue and non-virtue, either on their own or at the urging of others. Of course, the formless realm gods wouldn't have people even around reminding them. At death they have neither pain nor pleasure. I think this is still referring to desire realm people, not the upper realms. When you die with a virtuous mind, it lasts as long as there is coarse discrimination. But once subtle discrimination is activated, the virtuous mind stops and becomes an ethically neutral mind. So mapping that onto Tantra, it's at the time when the 80 conceptions absorb and you have the white vision. At this point, you cannot retrieve the virtue with which you had become familiar, nor can others remind you. Also, because at that time the breath has stopped, the heart stopped, you're not hearing anything anymore. That faculty has absorbed. So, you don't have the ability to discriminate and remember yourself, and even if others are telling you something, you can't hear. As the same holds true for non-virtuous minds, all minds of death are ethically neutral. Yeah, so the actual mind of death, which is when the mind leaves the body, that's a neutral state of mind. Okay, they're ethically neutral after the onset of subtle discrimination. Vasubandhu's Treasury of Knowledge auto-commentary says that both virtuous minds and non-virtuous minds are clear and thus incompatible with the cessation of coarse consciousness at death. I'm not sure what that means. Virtuous and non-virtuous minds are clear and thus incompatible with the cessation of coarse consciousness at death. Oh, maybe that means, yeah, well, I don't know. Anyway, we'll have to ask somebody. Okay, then the next outline is where the heat gathers. Okay, so among those who are currently cultivating non-virtue, consciousness leaves the body, coming down from the upper parts, which become cold first. So your head would start becoming cold and, going here. Yeah. When it reaches the heart, it leaves the body. The consciousness of someone who is currently cultivating virtue leaves coming up from the lower parts, and the body becomes cold from the lower parts. In both cases, consciousness leaves from the heart. The point at which consciousness first enters the fertilized ovum becomes the body's heart. Consciousness finally leaves the body from where it first entered. Okay, so at the time of conception, you have the union of the sperm and egg, and the consciousness enters into that, and that forms the heart of the person, not the physical heart, but the heart chakra. Yeah, and so that union becomes, what is the heart chakra. From there, then all the cells divide and multiply, and you get the whole large body. Okay, so people who commit non-virtue, the body starts getting cold from the top down. Then the heat from the lower part leaves too, until everything's finally at the heart, and then the mind leaves. The people who have virtue, then the body starts getting cold at the feet first, going up, and then afterwards here going down, and it leaves from the heart. Okay, so if somebody's doing the transference of consciousness practice, then you want the consciousness to leave through the crown of the head. So that's why they often say, if you're with somebody who's dying, don't touch them after the heart and everything stops. But when you do, first touch the crown of the head. The idea that might, if the consciousness is still there, might pull it out going that way, which is more auspicious. One time, I think I've told you the story when I was with that monk who died. And when he first, the old Tibetan monk, when he first was dying, his friends were, they were out, and then they came back. When they found that he was dying, they started doing puja. And when they finished puja, then one of the monks went into the room, and he came out smiling because he had, kind of assessed, watched the signs and everything. Apparently the heat had started to leave from the bottom up. It had gathered at the heart. The substances had come out of the places where they come out. Anyway, he came out and he kind of had assessed the body of his friend, and he said, "Oh, he's fine. He's on his way. This is really good." Yeah? So it was very nice to watch that. Yeah. It's a very old monk, nobody paid much attention to him, in Dharamsala. And he fell down outside one day outside of his room, and then some people saw him, and we started taking care of him. Okay, so I already said that. Then, how you reach the intermediate state after death. Okay, so in the Pali system in general, they say that you go from the last moment of consciousness of one life directly into the first moment of consciousness of the next life. They don't usually talk about an intermediate stage, although there are some Pali texts that do talk about it. But in the Mahayana, they always talk about there being this bardo, or intermediate period. Okay. So as the consciousness leaves from that spot here, as just explained, you die and reach the intermediate stage immediately, just as one arm of a balancing scale tips up while the other one tips down. So as soon as consciousness leaves, boom, you're in the bardo. Okay. As to its causes, the intermediate stage is contingent upon one having become attached to your body and being filled with delight in your previous worldly activities. Okay? So that's attachment to self, isn't it? A lot of attachment, a lot of self-grasping, and filled with delight, in your previous worldly activities. So you want another life in samsara because you think samsara is fantastic. So intermediate stage is contingent upon that, and to karma, whether virtuous or non-virtuous. So we really see the disadvantages of self-grasping here. Furthermore, the being of the intermediate state possesses a complete set of sensory faculties, such as eyes, as well as the form of the body it will have in the realm into which it will be reborn. So in the bardo, you take a very subtle kind of body that is similar to the body that you're going to be reborn into. So if you're going to be born as a human, you'll have a body that's going to look similar to that human being that you're going to be reborn as according to the karma that's been ripening as you've been going through the death process. Okay? It's a very subtle body, and it can travel, the bardo body can travel anywhere except into, if it's going to be reborn as a human, it can't travel into the womb where it's going to be reborn until all the causes and conditions come together. But it can go through walls, it has certain clairvoyant powers, it's rushing here and there and here and there. The bardo being seems to get really excited about a lot of different things, They say that it's going to come a little bit later, but people who have what they call the divine eye. They have some kind of clairvoyance. They may be able to see Bardo beings, but in general, no. Well, if you're seeing it through having clairvoyant powers, yes. If it, or otherwise, it could be some being born as a spirit. It could, yeah, it could be some being born as a spirit. Okay. Okay, so this Bardo being has all their sense faculties, eyes, ears, and so on. The form of the body it's going to have in terms of the next rebirth. Yeah. And until it takes rebirth, its vision is unimpeded, like the divine eye. And its body is as well as unimpeded, as though it had miraculous powers. So we've all had this before. You know? We've all had this karmically created miraculous powers, da-da-da-da-da-da. Has it got us to liberation? No. Okay. So the treasury, there's a quote from the Treasury of Knowledge. It has the form which it will have in the prior time. Here, which is the time prior to death in the next life. So when they say prior time, it's you're entering the body, you're entering the Bardo. That body is going to be similar to the body you have of the prior time, meaning the time prior to the death of your next life. So in other words, it's going to look like what your next life is. Beginning with the moment of birth in the next life. Yeah, beginning with the moment of birth. Others of the same type or those with pure divine vision see it. It has miraculous karmic power. Okay, so who can see the Bardo beings? Others of the same type. So the same type, it doesn't explain. Does that mean all Bardo beings can see each other, or only Bardo beings of a similar, who are going to be born in a similar realm, can see each other? Has anybody heard what that is? Yeah, it doesn't explain here. Yeah, but again, that doesn't say, yeah, exactly. It has miraculous karmic power and all the sensory faculties. It is unimpeded. It does not change, and it feeds on odors. Okay, so this is coming from Vasubandhu, so it feeds on odors. So there's, I think this is where in Chinese culture, right? Yeah, and also in Tibetan culture, very often after somebody dies, they'll burn food, or they will offer food, thinking that the intermediate stage being will feed on odor, will be nourished by the odors. But there seems to also, I remember having somewhere in my mind some discussion about, is this actually speaking about Bardo beings, or is it speaking about Gandharvas, which are one kind of spirit beings? So I don't know. I'm not an expert on that kind of stuff, but I remember hearing something like that. Okay, so Vasubandhu means that the being of the intermediate stage can be seen by beings there who are of its own type. And so it could mean of the realm that its own type could be of the realm that it's going to be born into. So it can be seen by them and by persons who have used meditation to attain the impeccable divine eye. Okay? So it's people who have that kind of clairvoyant ability through meditation. He also claims that once you reach the intermediate state for a certain rebirth, you will not change to the intermediate form of any other rebirth. However, the compendium of knowledge holds that such changes do occur. So Vasubandhu and Asanga, who are brothers, don't always agree with each other. Yeah, so Vasubandhu says once that karma is ripened, you have that bardo being, that bardo body, you are definitely going to take that particular life. Even if you have to have a few little mini deaths in between, nothing's going to change. You'll have it. Asangas, his brother, says that when you get a bardo body, it can last for up to 7 days, and if the conditions haven't come together for you to take another body, then you go through a little mini death in the bardo. And so his brother Asanga says when you experience that little mini death, sometimes the karma can change. And here's where it becomes valuable for other people to have made charity with your possessions, or done puja for you, or made prayers or whatever, because it can encourage some kind of different karma to ripen, and so that the next rebirth can be different than the original karma that had said it was going to be. I'm not sure how often that happens, but it can happen. Okay. Then it goes into explaining what prior time means, but we'll skip that. Okay. Some claim mistakenly that the beings of the intermediate state have the shape of the body from its previous life. Okay? So he says this is mistaken. Yeah. So lots of times in different cultures, you will hear, people will say after a friend or relative died, "Oh, I saw them, they were in the kitchen." Yeah. And actually, what he's saying here is, no, that's not your friend or relative that was in the kitchen, because they're going to have the shape of the body for their future life, not the shape of the body from the body they came from. Okay. Also, when somebody's left their body, they're gone. Yeah. So they don't really care what you do with their body. Okay. So a lot of times in different cultures, people want to bathe the body. You have to bring it home. You have to make it look good. You have to do all these things. And that is done more for the living. From the side of the dead, when you've left that body, you're gone. And you're going forward, and it's a tumultuous time. So you're not back hanging onto your other body. It's quite interesting, though, in cultures where people believe a lot in spirits and bardo beings and this kind of stuff. When I lived in Singapore, the next door neighbor to where I was living, I forget who it was, maybe the father of the family, one adult in the family had died. And so, everybody comes and, they see the body and they play mahjong and they gossip and everything. It's the living coming together to console each other, isn't it? Yeah. Every culture has some version of this kind of thing. In some cultures you hire people to come and cry, because the more people who cry, then the more well-loved you are. Yeah. In other cultures, they come and they bring food and you eat all day and all night. So a lot of these things we do around death are more for the living than for the dead. That's okay, but we should admit it. And doing things for the living is good, because the living are grieving, and so these kind of communal activities are good. It helps them solve the thing. But so anyway, this person had died, so the family was over there. And the woman, the daughter of the family, was going out to get some food. So as she was going through the kitchen, she accidentally stumbled on a bucket and then, uprighted it and then went out the door and, got the food and brought the food back. And when she came back, everybody was going, we heard him in the kitchen. He made noise in the kitchen. He was in the kitchen while you were out. And she was saying, no, I tripped over the bucket. No, he was in the kitchen. Yeah. So you can see how much our namtok, our superstitious thoughts kind of play into all these kinds of things.
So there's no such thing as ghosts and haunted houses?
No, there could.
These resemblances of?
No, they could be spirits, people born in spirits who live in haunted houses, but they're not necessarily bardo beings. Okay? Yeah, so there's a difference between a bardo being who's in that intermediate stage before they take their next life and somebody who's been born as a spirit and is living out that karma of that spirit rebirth. Yeah?
The bardo being doesn't go back to his previous life?
No.
What sort of abilities does it have? Like, can it do stuff? Can it move body form?
Well, it says, they have all their senses, so they can see, hear, smell, taste, touch. They can go anywhere just by thinking of a place, they go there.
Does it affect other beings?
Oh, can it affect human beings who are left on Earth? I've never heard much of that. I don't think so. But it's very interesting because within Tibetan Buddhism, you have different traditions that say different things about the bardo beings. Some of the traditions, I think, adopted many of the things that from the bone tradition, perhaps. Yeah, where they do talk about beings coming back and being near the body or whatever. But here in this description, it's kind of once you've left, you're gone. Yeah.
Well, they're zooming around, like, do they push over stuff and
Oh, can they do things in the human world? Can they, move something from one place to another? I don't know. Next time you're in the bardo, yeah, right. Send me a message and let me know. Yeah, so if I get a message from you, then I'll know that bardo beings can influence. Yeah. Yeah.
And I heard also that's why some practitioners do the prayers out loud and the recitation of mantras, because those bardo beings can hear that, are able to listen to that.
Listen to that, yeah. So that could be. Mm-hmm.
when you get reborn in the spirit,
But when,
the possibility of being reborn in the spirit,
yeah.
to which realm will that belong?
Oh, spirits are usually hungry ghost realms, although they could be like an asura, a demigod, too. Yeah. But, we really need to ask, too, are spirits as prevalent as we think they are? Because His Holiness often teases the Tibetans and, says, you're blaming all these things on spirits, and they're actually just due to karma. So, okay. Okay. So some mistakenly think that beings of the intermediate state has the shape of the body from its previous life. There are also those who claim, in view of, something else, that it is the image of the body from its former life for 3.5 days and the image of the body it will possess in its next life for 3.5 days. Okay, so there's people who claim that. But Tsongkhapa says, in the absence of any accurate sources, such assertions are simply fabrications. The Yogacarya Bhumi says that the being of the intermediate state does not desire its former body, since its consciousness does not remain there. So that's clear. Okay? Hence the assertion that it becomes disturbed upon seeing its former body is also a fabrication. Okay? But what you can see is in this kind of area, there's so much mixture of folk culture that it's hard to know exactly what is and what isn't, because you have folk culture, you have these kinds of things, but then, like I said, within Tibetan Buddhism, different traditions will say different things about what happens in the bardo. So what is Dharma, what is folk culture? I don't really know. What is considered an accurate source? Well, clearly it has to come from the Buddha, but then some people think some texts come from the Buddha, and other people say, no, those texts don't. Yeah. Near-death experience, I think there still must be some of the gross discrimination, or maybe it's like bordering on the time of the white appearance, because the breath is stopping. But the consciousness hasn't left the body in a near-death experience. Yeah, usually once the consciousness leaves the body, it's gone. But of course, Tibetan culture, they do talk about zombies, people who will come back and be in their old bodies. And that's why in certain places the houses have very low doorways, because if you come and re-inhabit your old body, you're standing upright and you can't bend over. So if they make the doors low, the zombies can't get out. Okay? Don't ask me questions about this stuff. Yeah, different people say different things. And, yeah, just because people see that doesn't mean that's what's happening. Remember, don't believe everything you think. Yeah. So, So people can have visions of all sorts of stuff. That doesn't mean that is an actual external reality. Okay, but what was is very interesting is there's one scientist. He's a neuroscientist. I can't remember his name. He wrote a book. It's sold gazillions of copies. He had some kind of stroke in which he knew that if that part of the brain had the stroke, then there's no way you could be cognizing anything. But after he had a stroke, he saw like this whole kind of heavenly realm and all this stuff. And he wound up recovering from the stroke, and then he was telling people about everything he saw. And he says, before I saw this, I just thought when you're dead, and the mind is just an emergent property of the body. But now I had this experience, and I think, the mind is something separate, and that these other realms of being exist. Okay? So, as to, what he saw in this vision, if that was an actual external reality, or if it was just an appearance, a karmic appearance to his mind. And if you think deeply about it, sometimes the difference between the two is not so big. Then, what I can't judge. Okay? Yeah, he remembered that. So he hadn't left the body, but he was in that thing where the discrimination was going, and then he remembered the mantra. No, he hadn't left the body. Had not. The mind was still in the body. Yeah. Okay. The intermediate state appears to those who have cultivated non-virtue as like a black blanket or the pitch black darkness of night, while to those who have cultivated virtue it is like white cloth or a moonlit night. You see beings of the intermediate state who are of the same type as yourself, as well as the place where each of you will be reborn. Okay, so you're going towards the next life. The Descent into the Womb Sutra describes the color differences in the intermediate state. So here's the color of your body in the intermediate state. For someone who is to be reborn a hell being, the intermediate state is like a charred log. For one to be reborn an animal, it is like smoke. For one to be reborn a hungry ghost, it is like water. For one to be reborn a god in the desire realm and a human, it is like gold. For one to be reborn a deity of the form realm, it is white. Okay, so maybe the Buddha saw this and, wrote it in the sutra. Okay, there is an intermediate state when you are born into the desire realm and the form realm, from the formless realm. Okay, but when you were born into the formless realm from the desire realm and the form realm, you attain the aggregates of a formless being immediately upon dying. There is no intermediate state. Okay, so if you're a human being, you've generated the meditative absorption of the immaterial realm. When you die, then instantly you're born as that immaterial realm or formless realm being. There's no intermediate state. But for all the other rebirths, there is, I think. Okay, in the classic texts that are reliable sources, there is no description of any other special cases where there is no intermediate state. Okay, so he's saying the only time when there's no intermediate state is when you're in the desire or form realm and you're going to be reborn in the formless realm. Consequently, with respect to the assertion that there is a direct transition upward to a heaven or downward to a hell, it is wrong to claim that there is no intermediate state. So even if you're going to be reborn in one of the three lower realms, it appears that there's an intermediate state there. The Descent into the Womb Sutra says that beings of the intermediate state who are to be reborn as gods ascend. Those who to be reborn as humans move straight forward. Those to be reborn as wrongdoers move with their heads lowered and their eyes downward. I heard once before, maybe it was a different translation, that they traveled upside down. It seems that this last part is meant to describe the intermediate stages for the three miserable realms, so the lower realms like that. Okay? With regard to the lifespan, if a being of the intermediate state has not found the conditions for rebirth, it may remain for any length of time, up to 7 days, in that particular body. Once it has found such conditions, its lifespan is not definitely 7 days. Okay? So let's say you're going to have a rebirth as a human being, and you're going to be reborn into such and such a body, and mom and dad are, on business trips in different places, so there's no conditions for you to be reborn. At that time, they're away for over a week, so you have this little mini death, And then you take another Bardo body. Let's say the karma hasn't changed, so it's still in the shape of going to be their child. And then after 2 days, they come back home, and then you get conceived. So that's what it means by, once it is found conditions, its lifespan is not definitely 7 days. So it could be, the conditions have come together, mom and dad are in bed, you join them. Yeah. And then you're there for the next 40 years. They're going, ay, 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 what did we do? For one moment of pleasure, the next 40 years. Okay. If it does not find the conditions for rebirth within 7 days, it assumes another body within the intermediate state. It may stay in the intermediate state from 1 to 7 weeks. However, as it certainly will have found the conditions for rebirth within that time, it stays no longer than that. So, I remember during one of the interviews with His Holiness, this kind of question came up. So His Holiness says, well, why is it, they have to be reborn within 49 days? Because 48 days is too few and 50 days is too many. And then he just laughed. So that's another example of, how you explain things that you're just taking on faith, okay? 48 days too few, 50 too many, therefore you got to be reborn within 49. That answer your question? Good, thank you. Okay.
The answer I got when I asked that question was, there's no reason for 49 days, just the nature of karma is inconceivable.
Oh, yes. Oh, that one too. That's a good one, yeah? Yeah. Nature of karma, inconceivable nature of karma, yes. Yes, that's His Holiness says we always say karma. So when we say, it's karma, what we really mean is, I don't know. Why did this happen? It's karma. Meaning, I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Since the texts that are reliable sources, it's interesting, he doesn't describe which texts these are, except for Descent into the Womb Sutra. But anyway, those texts do not describe a longer lifespan than this. The claim that the being of the intermediate state may stay longer is incorrect. Okay? So for sure, all these people who are seeing, spirit, they're seeing forms of their past relatives, and they think they're in the Bardo body, If it's after 49 days, for sure not. Yeah. And also, if you don't have the divine eye, you're not fit to see a Bardo being. So it's probably some kind of spirit. A being of the intermediate state that is to be reborn as a god, in the god realm, for instance, may die after 7 days and either again reach the intermediate state of a celestial being, a god, or else reach the intermediate state of a human or some other form. So this is according to a sangha, that the karma can ripen in a different way. But definitely virtue produces a good rebirth and non-virtue an unfortunate rebirth. This is possible because a change in its karma can transform the seeds for its intermediate state. The same holds true for other beings of the intermediate state as well. How are we doing? Okay, maybe we better pause here if there's questions or comments. Yeah.
I've always been curious in our Lama Chopa when it talks about mantra-born, simultaneously born.
Those are talking about dakinis. Yeah, so it's a whole other thing. Mm. Oh, the rainbow body is for somebody who's been practicing the completion stage tantra. At the time of death, their physical body evaporates like a rainbow, and only their hair and nails are left behind. And they go to the Pure Land of whatever deity they're practicing. Yeah?
Just to, I guess, get precise about what's happening, like when we're continuing to do prayers and chants at the time someone's died,
Mm-hmm.
they stop breathing. So we continue to do that because their minds haven't completely, their consciousness hasn't completely absorbed, and we don't know when it's done, right? So we just keep going and keep going and keep going.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there's a point past which that it can no longer influence that person except for virtue, right?
Yeah. Yeah, unless there's just, I don't know, some kind of subtle something happening. But, you know, but they do say that if they're in the intermediate stage, you make offerings and prayers, it may be able to influence how their karma ripens. Yeah, but it would have to be something very strong to do that. And definitely, you know, if it's, you know, sometimes they do all these ceremonies for people who have died long time ago. Definitely that person's been reborn already. Okay? So how much you're, you know, okay, so let's say somebody that you're very close to dies now, and then in you know, by the time a year is over, they've already been reborn somewhere. Okay? Maybe they're a baby that's living down the block from you. Maybe they're the spider crawling around in your room. You don't really know. Okay? People still like to do prayers and dedicate it for their relatives, but how much at that point it actually affects, I don't know. You know, because the person's already taken a rebirth, their growth senses are functioning, they're completely absorbed in trying to deal with their new life.
I just heard if there's a karmic connection of that person that might still have some kind of influence, but how?
Maybe. That's one of the inconceivable factors of karma. Yeah, I can't judge. Yeah.
There are a few questions online. The first, just to clarify, the person is asking if you do these pujas or chant at home within 49 days, does it help to alter the place of rebirth?
It might, in the sense that it might help some new karma ripen at that point of 7 days. That's why, you know, you usually do it 7 days, 14, 21. You do the prayers, especially on those days when the bardo being could be dying and then regenerating.
And then someone asked, when you're on the bardo and have these miraculous powers, can you learn and remember? Are there practices to help make this a beneficial practice time?
Okay. If you're practicing Tantra, highest yoga Tantra, yes, you can practice in the bardo being, in the bardo body and, you know, do different things. For the rest of us who have difficulty practicing when we're alive and when we're awake, then just extrapolate how easy it's going to be to practice in the bardo. Okay.
Someone says, this is all interesting, but how does it help us to know how many days we're in the bardo and what body we take in regards to our Dharma practice?
Okay, this is why I don't usually teach this stuff very much, because people get so engrossed in the details and wanting to know about spirits and bardo beings and this and that, because it's mysterious and we don't know, and their minds are, you know. But this is a good question. Why is this taught in Lamrim Chenmo? I think to make us generate renunciation for samsara. because we think about these things and what it's going to be like to be in the bardo being and how confusing it is. And it's like, well, how many times do I want to keep going through that? Okay? So all of this is taught for the purpose of us generating renunciation, not for the purpose of us getting enamored with some kind of mystical, magical thing that is the inconceivable nature of the inconceivable thing that is inconceivable all the way around, and that I recommend you ask somebody else these questions, not me. Because my mind is inconceivably dumb about this. Okay? Next. Yes?
Regarding the factors of death,
Uh-huh.
would suicide or being murdered fall under the number 8, which is the untimely death?
Yeah, the being murdered would be the untimely death where some kind of negative karma ripens suddenly. You know, suicide, I don't know, you know? Because suicide is somebody's own personal choice. I don't think that's karmically determined. That's that person's personal choice. From a mind made in a mind that is extremely confused and in great suffering. So which one of the three it is, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah.
The being that dies in the womb through miscarriage,
Uh-huh.
that was just a short bit of that karma
Yeah.
for human life.
Yeah.
Then does that mean that the next life is likely a lower rebirth, or?
Who knows? Depends what karma ripens. We don't know. Okay? They often say that, let's say somebody was a human being and had an untimely death, they still might have the karmic lifespan to live a few, sometime longer. So that would ripen in their being conceived in the womb, but not living to be born. Okay, where they're born after that? Ask the Buddha, please.
Well,
Okay.
that was clear. I was just wondering why that chunk was like that.
Yeah, that's what they often say. Yeah? Can we stick with 2 and 2, something I can answer? 2 plus 2. Yeah. Okay.
A cultural perspective when somebody seems to be lingering and in our culture we say they're waiting for like a relative to show up before they die.
Mm-hmm.
We make it sound like they have all this control over when they die.
Yeah.
And I just kind of
I wonder about that too, because if they're waiting for somebody to show up, that means they're having if it's true, they're having incredible strong clinging at that time. I don't know if that's really true or not. I have no way of knowing what's inside the mind of a dying person, a specific individual. Okay, can we stick with 2 plus 2? Yes. It's 4. Thank you. A question I can answer. Okay. Yeah. Uh-huh.
What are your thoughts on medications used to help ease pain and suffering in hospice care?
My thought on medication used to relieve pain and suffering in hospice care. I think it depends on the individual. If somebody is in such excruciating pain, there's no way they can kind of guide their mind. So it might be good to have some medication. How much non-Dharma practitioners can guide their mind anyway? We don't really know. For a practitioner, It's hard to say because the medication will make the mind foggy. But again, if they're in such pain that then they can't concentrate at all, it's better to have it be foggy than, but then some individuals may say, I don't want pain medication no matter what. But you see, for the thing of just people who don't know anything about the Dharma, in general, they've never prepared for death. They've never prepared. They don't have the slightest clue. So what to do? Think about a virtuous thought. What in the world's a virtuous thought? Yeah? So, if we look how little control we have over our minds when our bodies are healthy, then how much control are we going to have over them when all the, elements are absorbing and, like that? I mean, when you're sick, how much control do you have over your mind? I find just being in an airplane for a long period of time, my mind gets totally spaced out. I can't think clearly. Yeah? So what's going to happen at the time of death? Okay, last question. We're trying to influence the merit so that they have more merit that will extend the lifespan. Yeah? Okay. Okay, 3 plus 3 equals 6. Yeah? Thank you. I appreciate those easy questions. I have some self-confidence now. When I was preparing for this evening's teachings, I was going, I know what this teaching evening is going to be like, especially with Singaporeans listening. They didn't ask half the questions that I thought they were going to ask. They should have asked what's happening when you go to the Kuan Yin temple on what's the name of the street? Waterloo Street. Is that being a spirit? Is that being a bardo being? What is it? They didn't ask that question. Gee. Huh?
They're setting it up.
Yeah, right. So, okay.